Good evening, everybody. Meeting time, 60 minutes. I call the meeting to order. I'd like to call this meeting of the Community Development Engagement Committee to order. I would also like to thank our viewing audience for tuning in. I'd like to ask Bishop Smith to lead us in the invocation.
Father, we thank you for this board. We thank you right now for those leaders that are around this table and those that are not here. We thank you for wisdom and guidance in everything that we do. We thank you right now, Lord God, for the city of Jacksonville. And right now we ask that you give us keen insight, discernment, and as always, your Holy Spirit to lead us. We thank you for this meeting being in decency and in order. It's in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Welcome introduction of the members here. I'm really not familiar with all the members yet, so we'll go around the table. If you can introduce yourself, I appreciate that. Start welcome Mr. Brian Jackson.
Good evening. Brian H. Jackson, Jacksonville City Council liaison to this board.
Gloria Whitney, member.
Paula Jones, member.
Betty Dawson, member.
Oh, I'm sorry. Don Carter, concerned community member.
All right. Pamela Trafton, Community Engagement Coordinator.
Lily Gray, Director of Community Engagement.
Deanna Trouble, and I'm with Jacksonville JUMPO, which is the Jacksonville Urban Metropolitan Planning Organization. It's a mouthful, but we do transportation planning.
I'm here with Deanna as well. My name is Anthony Prince, and I'm the city's Transportation Services Director. I think I've met some of you before.
Tracy Jackson, Community Engagement Manager.
Steve Forney, I'm a member. I'm also a member of the Jacksonville Planning Board.
Marshall Wright, member.
I'm Will Smith, Vice Chairperson.
Thank you, everybody. Welcome aboard. Has everybody had the opportunity to review the agenda? Take a few seconds to do that. If no change or addition, then I'll look for a motion on the minutes.
Motion to adopt the agenda.
Second.
Okay, motion is carried. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The minutes of the 27th August 2018 meeting are provided for consideration. Has everybody an opportunity to review the agenda? Any changes or additions to that? Minutes, sorry. No change or addition. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Any discussion? Motion is carried. Tonight we have Anthony Perez with us. Prince, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
That's Spanish, Perez.
That's the Spanish version.
Yes, sir. Tonight we have Anthony Perez with us. Anthony will provide an update on the new connection at New Frontier Way to the business park and to the new railroad way connection for public on Western Boulevard. He will also make a presentation to the ADA Public Transportation Plan, and your input is encouraged.
Yes, sir.
Anthony?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. As the chairman, hold on. Let me catch up with myself. There we go. As the chairman mentioned, Transportation Services is here for 3 items tonight. 2 of those items, I believe, were raised as, excuse me? 2 of those items were raised as concerns at your last meeting, and I'm here to hopefully address those concerns and answer any questions that you may have. And then the 3rd item is really just something that we wanted you to be aware of. The city's been working on an ADA transition plan for the better part of the last year, and we're having a public meeting tomorrow to share the draft plan and get feedback. And of course, as one of our primary conduits to the community, we felt that it was appropriate to come and give you an update on what the plan is, where we're headed, what we've already accomplished, etc. Any questions? All right, well, we'll jump right in. I, of course, was not at the last meeting when these came up, so I'm just kind of swinging in the dark here, trying to answer the questions that you may have. But what I'd like to do is just kind of go over a brief presentation on this particular item, which is the Gateway Marketplace development that's currently under construction. It's over on Western Boulevard between Henderson Drive and Gateway North. Just to give you a little bit of background on that, and then, as the chairman mentioned, we'll talk about New Frontier Way, Plantation Boulevard, and Gum Branch Road. So is everyone familiar with this project? You've seen it out there. This did come up as an item of concern at the last meeting, right? Okay. All right, so I'm somewhat on target here. But in general, and I'm not the expert here, but I'm giving you the information that I have. It's a multiple phase project, and in fact, it's a very large project. In total, it's going to be about 30 acres of new commercial development. But what's under construction right now is what we're considering phase one, which is about 11 acres, 114,000 square feet of retail, which is a lot of retail space, about 516 parking spaces. But as you can see there under phase two, a majority of the site is reserved for future development. Okay? Some of that land area also is undevelopable, so it's not to say that all 20 acres is going to be built in the future with retail, but a substantial portion of that will be. As you can see in the background, we've got conduits going into place, stormwater retention ponds, building pads. They're making a lot of good progress out there. Initially, my understanding was that they wanted to have the project open this year. However, based upon all the challenges that we've had with the winter weather and the rain and the hurricanes, etc., I don't believe that they're on pace for that right now. So let's look at it from an aerial view here, and to give you some points of reference, the bottom of the screen is Western Boulevard. On the right-hand side there is Gateway North. On the left-hand side over here, see if Glenn can help me with the teleprompter here. On the left-hand side of the screen, there we go. Over here, just imagine I drew a line over there on the left-hand side. On the left-hand side of the screen is Henderson Extension, over there where the Longhorn Steakhouse is, etc. Now they're just messing with me, right? So, okay, forget it.
Trying
Have the
to see
magic
this,
touch.
let me see.
I don't have the magic touch. Anyways, the general area is, like I said before, between Gateway North and Henderson Drive, okay? The green area shown is basically the Publix development. That's the major flagship anchor that's going on in this particular development. With the Publix comes a whole series of junior tenants. You know, a development like that usually doesn't just come by itself. It comes as part of a much larger shopping center. And that's what's under construction in the green. And as I mentioned before, well, with that phase one, we also have some out parcels that face Western Boulevard. Any traditional development these days has those. It's where you typically find your restaurants, etc., out towards the road. And then, as I mentioned before, there is a future phase that's reserved for additional development. But right now, they're focusing, my understanding is that they're focusing on the Publix as well as a handful of the out parcels that are out towards Western. With any development of this size, of course, the city is concerned about what will this project do to local traffic, okay? Statutorily, we're not allowed to deny a development for increasing traffic, okay? But what we can do and what we're allowed to do by general statute is require the developers to do things to help mitigate the traffic that's brought on by their new development. The way we do that is through a TIA, a traffic impact analysis. It's required by our UDO. It's allowed by general statute. And what it does is it allows us to evaluate existing as well as future roadway conditions. So how's the road operating today? How's it going to operate when this new development is in and fully built out? They are developed by independent professional engineers, so folks who are certified to do this type of work. And of course, it comes with review by multiple layers of NCDOT staff, both locally and in Raleigh. And then we also have review approval over it as well. Okay, so nothing is done. They don't even lift a finger out there moving any type of dirt or constructing anything until we're able to look at this and come to an agreement upon what they need to build in order to mitigate their traffic impacts. So the TIA is developed and it comes out with all these recommendations, and of course we would like to see all of them go into place. The developer doesn't want to pay for any of those. So we spend an extended amount of time negotiating with the DOT and the developer over what in fact they are going to construct as part of their project. This particular project has probably some of the most impacts or required improvements that we've seen in Jacksonville so far. Even with much, well, I wouldn't say larger, but with previous similar types of development, okay? The fact is that traffic on Western Boulevard is just heavy. So anytime you go and you put something new out there, it's going to further exacerbate that, and they're required to mitigate as much, to the greatest extent practical. So recommendations came out. We arm wrestled with the developer for the better part of 3 years over this. Basically, it said that you need to have multiple points of ingress and egress. So rather than concentrating traffic at one point, we want you to disperse it over multiple points, okay? It's also very important when you're talking about emergency response, because when you have one way in, one way out, that's the same for someone who wants to go to Publix as it is for somebody who's traveling in an ambulance trying to get to somebody. So that was a key recommendation. Internal connectivity was very important. We know how some of the older parking lots in Jacksonville function because the internal well, we all know, right? Well, we've learned from that, okay? And so internal connectivity, a functional roadway system was very important. New signal on Western, additional turn lanes, and they were also required to contribute to several DOT construction projects that are going to occur in that general area in the near future, okay?
A new light. That's what we need, another light in Western Boulevard.
I'm in the signal business. It's just job security, right? But I will tell you that the light has been positioned in the spot that it needs to be for it to function. And the developer has been charged with doing an optimization plan, optimization timing plan for that entire quarter. And it's going to cost them about $35,000 to do that.
Not bad.
What a deal, right?
Because I live off Henderson Extension, and it's terrible.
Well, let's move on, and we'll talk about Henderson here in just a
That's what I'm waiting on.
Okay, so just graphically, let's go through this a little bit. We talked about Publix, internal roadway connectivity, external roadway access. Okay, you can see there's what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points of ingress and egress from the external roadway connection. We got over here at, oh look, it's working for me now. Henderson, we got 2 on Western, 3 on Western, and then 1 over here at Gateway North. So again, that safety and traffic distribution, we're accomplishing that. Have some additional right turn lanes on Western because we really don't like people slamming on their brakes and turning right when traffic is progressing, okay? It's a capacity as well as a safety improvement. And then, as I mentioned, there will be a new traffic signal. It's an existing median opening out there. It's right across from Marlin Drive, okay? Excuse me?
First Citizens Bank.
First Citizens Bank is a good landmark, yes. And the driveways here and the turn lanes here have all been sized appropriately. The developer will improve all of those to accommodate their traffic. So we'll have 2 lanes turning left into the project. We'll have multiple lanes turning out. We'll have right turn lanes going in. It's fully built out based upon what the traffic model is showing for their development. And I should mention that these come at a significant cost. The developer is spending millions and millions and millions of dollars on this. I mean, the signal alone, just the traffic signal is probably close to $500,000.
Now, one question.
Yes, sir.
The access point back in the Gateway North, is that pouring it out right there next to where, like, the traffic is by the Verizon and the,
Yeah.
It is not.
and all, oh, so it's further back?
Nope, that's where we're headed right now.
Okay,
Okay.
okay.
So, just as a point of reference here, this road that you see is this road, the dash road, okay?
Okay.
And it was specifically located on Gateway Drive to, Gateway North Drive to facilitate line of sight, safety, efficiency, and it's also going to include, you see those turn arrows, it's going to include a new left and a right turn lane, okay? So vehicles that are queued up, particularly those ones turning left into the development, they're going to be out of the through movement traffic. And there's going to be a turn lane for multiple vehicles to sit there and wait for a gap to cross over. The right turn lane, just like the ones that we have on Western Boulevard, is to help get those folks out of traffic so they're not slowing things down and creating safety problems. If you go down Gateway Drive North, you can see the area that's been cleared for this access road, and that's in fact where it's going to be located. We spent a lot of time negotiating with the developer over exactly where this was to go, because initially they wanted it to almost line up with that one over at Verizon.
Okay.
You know, and that one at Verizon was located there because of the stream. You know, we couldn't get it any further away from the intersection. This one, it's a matter of a little bit more cost on their part, but the end result is going to be better. We're going to have left and right turn lanes, good line of sight, adequate stacking, plenty of room for it to work efficiently. Okay? Any questions about that?
One question.
Yes, ma'am.
Why did they not take Henderson Drive extension and take it all the way across behind Longhorn State House? Make it go all the way out to 17 like they started to.
You're just anticipating all of my slides here.
Well,
Give me just a
because,
second,
look,
we'll get
it's
to
a
that.
problem for me. I live over there, and in the evening, I can't even get out of my street.
Well,
Because everybody take Henderson to cut through. That's the only through road. And then everyone lives past Western Boulevard Extension, past what, all those, everything. It's just jammed up out there. Like
No
we said, we
question.
don't even take it on the weekend because there's so much traffic was backed up. Either there's an accident during daytime,
Well,
right there at the steakhouse.
In fact, a lot of people don't realize, you know, in other communities, peak hour traffic is during the evening on the
Oh, it's
weekday.
crazy. You can't go to.
In Jacksonville, peak hour traffic is noon on Saturday.
Yeah.
Most people don't realize. I mean, we probably do, but,
I do.
you know, the other people coming in, like transportation professionals, don't.
Yeah, they don't realize that.
But I'll get to that in just one second.
Thank
We've
you.
got you covered.
Take
So
care.
let's talk about some improvements that are coming. Some of these are sooner rather than later, but all of these are going to enhance mobility and safety in that area.
There it is right there.
We were recently able to get funding from DOT to 6-lane Western Boulevard. And that's not the entire length, but that's a section between 17 and Gum Branch Road. Much needed project, definitely going to help a lot of things out there. More recent or more current projects that are going to happen in the immediate future. This is the intersection of Gateway North and Western Boulevard. So Cheddar's is here and Carolina Ale House is over in here.
Right.
The Verizon store is over here. Of course, this is an old photo. But you can see we're widening the intersection, we're adding turn lanes. There's also going to be a median constructed down through here to help some of that crossover traffic at Verizon, because that is unsafe.
Is this hard for the school buses to get in? Why did they let Verizon sit right there at that corner? But you have to stop sometimes just to get in before, you know, to turn, because the people trying to get out, trying to get in.
The real hardship there is the creek that runs kind of parallel to Western Boulevard.
Yeah.
You know, and if we had, in an ideal world, we could have permitted a crossing of that creek and had that driveway a little bit further back from the intersection.
Right.
But that's simply something that the Army Corps wasn't going to allow us to do. So that's why that driveway is so close, but there is a caveat in their permit approval that basically says if a crash history develops, then we will take, you know, countermeasures to fix that. So even though it's kind of an uncomfortable situation out there, we really haven't seen a crash history yet.
Not yet.
And it's unfortunate that we have to see those types of results to take action, but that's generally the way it happens.
Is this an environmental concern issue? That's what that is primarily, right?
You're talking about the stream crossing?
Yeah, stream
Yes.
crossing.
Mhm.
We want you to do it because of
Our-
environment.
Army Corps is one of the environmental permitting agencies for stuff like that. All right, let's keep moving. So we've got additional enhancements at Gateway South. You can see we're adding lanes. On this side, this is Chick-fil-A. This is the shoe store. Yeah, shoe store. Of course, we all know about the queuing that occurs here. The challenge on that side, of course, is development has basically happened all the way up to the right-of-way line, so there's not enough room for us to go in and put a bunch of additional lanes. We are going to add one lane on that approach to help increase some capacity. At the same time, we're going to extend this left turn lane on Western so that we can get more vehicles out of the through lanes because folks want to turn in here. The challenge is the utilities and all the other conflicts over in there do not allow us to put an additional left turn receiving lane. If we could, then we would have dual lefts, but just because of the constraints there, we're not going to be able to put dual lefts in. Western and Henderson, this is not the project I was talking about, but this is still a good one. Here is Longhorn, right? And this is the gas station here. This is undeveloped, of course, that's where Panda Express and all that stuff is. So this project is being designed, will be let for construction very soon. This is to add dual lefts from Western onto Henderson. Okay, and because of the amount of space over here, we will be able to add that additional lane to receive that dual left traffic. And then we're also going to make it more permanent, the dual left turn that occurs from Henderson onto Western. And at the same time, we're going to take out that big mound, the hill. We're all very
Everybody goes over.
Yeah, Tracy gets air on that every time she goes through, so I mean, we need to fix that so she doesn't damage her car. But you know, that's one of the things that we're going to address with that particular project. Something else, and we're all probably very familiar, is that this area right in here is probably one of the most dangerous locations in Jacksonville. That project will install a median there. People are not going to be happy about it, but I can tell you for a fact that PD and fire respond there a lot. These are head-on collisions. They're not minor crashes. These are the ones that we don't want to have. Okay, so let's get to extending Henderson all the way to 17. Okay. This project right here is intended to improve regional connectivity in general to help disperse traffic. Okay, points of reference, you see Western here, you see Marine here, Jacksonville Parkway, Henderson Drive. Okay, right now we're working on a project, and I've got some literature here to pass around after I'm done talking, to extend Jacksonville Parkway from where it is right now all the way up to Ramsey Road, and then improve Ramsey Road back to Highway 17.
Back to where?
To Highway 17, Wilmington.
Where would it come out?
New Bern Highway. Is it Drummer?
On the other side of Walmart.
Kellum.
On the other side of Walmart? The new
Yeah,
Walmart?
way on the other
Way
side.
out, going toward New Bern.
Yeah, going towards New Bern.
Yeah, I think it is Drummer Kellum.
It's Drummer Kellum.
Kellum Road?
Always,
Okay.
But it's only Drummer Kellum for less than a quarter of a mile.
Right, I know where Drummer Kellum.
I get that one and Kellum Loop mixed up. Yeah, I think it's Drummer Kellum, but it's gonna come out.
It's different, that's why it confused me.
The intent is for it to come out north of town to kind of complete the bypass, if you will. Because as you know, the bypass right now, Jacksonville Parkway just dumps out on Western Boulevard.
That's right.
Yeah. So with this project, we would go up behind the Commons, tie into Ramsey, and then come back down to Highway 17. And that completes the bypass. So
And that might be Kellum Loop, is what it is.
One of the other.
Yeah, Drummer Kellum.
Right.
Drummer Kellum is the next one next to Bull Buick and John Deere. It's
Yes,
between
then
the
it
next-
is
Drummer
Kellum Loop. It is Kellum
Loop
Loop.
is all the way out to the end of the main road.
That's right, then it
Kellum
is
Loop
Kellum,
is
it
the
is
one you're
Kellum.
talking about, right?
Yes, that's right.
Because it comes around.
So,
So you'll come on.
back to Henderson Drive though, part of this project will extend Henderson Drive by Longhorn back into the woods, connecting with this Jacksonville Parkway, which will then, of course, connect over to 17, but then it's also going to tie into Commons Drive. So it'll be another point of ingress and egress for the Commons. And the access point at this time is planned right there at Fire Station 4, where I think it's called Fire Station Road or something like that pops out
Into the Commons.
into the Commons. But it will intersect with this Jacksonville Parkway extension, you know, so you'll be able to go from the Henderson extension, which I call it, to Jacksonville Parkway extension all the way over to 17 if you want. The project that we were just looking at ultimately will tie into this road just like that. You know, that main spine road that went back in from Western, it will tie into that Henderson extension at some point. Now, tethered to that project, hopefully we're going to get funding for it, but it was funded at one time and then the funding went away. We're hoping that it's going to come back, and that's for 4-laning Henderson extension all the way back to Gum Branch Road. That's a project that needs to happen for a variety of reasons.
Where the land come from?
The right-of-way is already there.
Okay, the buildings are already sitting on the road right at Henderson. Everything is parked right out on the road.
Well,
Talking about
this is
Henderson extension.
The extension, right.
So you
From
would have
Gum
to take the
Branch,
right-of-way.
from Gum Branch over to Western
Right,
Boulevard.
to Western.
That's right. And we would widen the Gum Branch Road intersection with that. That's gonna be the most challenging part.
Right, because there's a lot of stuff to do. Move to the county.
So that, we're building all this new road infrastructure for you now.
No, that's okay. I'm
Yeah,
moving to the
okay.
county.
If it makes you feel any better, we were in Wilmington today, so,
Oh,
you
okay,
know.
that's even worse.
Yeah. Any questions about Gateway Marketplace, or, I mean, if you like, I can come back at some point in the future and talk about all the roadway projects, but tonight we're just trying to answer the questions about, you know, what is the city doing to manage traffic associated with this development? So hopefully you're taking from this that we're taking it in a very strategic manner.
What's the outline for that 5-year plan? This is all in 5 years or 3 years or what?
The Jacksonville Parkway, I believe, is within 6 years, and so is that Henderson extension. Some of these other projects will be under construction next year, like the intersection widening projects. Those are imminent. I mean, those are fully designed. They're acquiring right-of-way right now. So, a lot of very positive things happening from a transportation standpoint right now.
Thank you, Mr.
Yes, sir. If you don't mind, I'll just move on to Gum Branch.
That's fine.
I may have missed the target on this one, but we can.
We're already confused, so just.
Well, how about
6
this?
years, I gotta.
We'll spend some time after the meeting. We'll iron out all those questions.
I'm just.
So, my understanding was there were questions about New Frontier Way, and I may have confused this a little bit because I focused more on Gum Branch and Plantation, but those two areas are definitely related. I mean, they're very close to one another.
That was the question that was raised by Pastor Phillips that would feed into River of Life.
And of course, he's got a very vested interest in that because River of Life Church is right here. We're all very familiar with this location. Gum Branch Road is going north-south on the screen. Plantation Boulevard is labeled on your left there. New Frontier Way is not labeled, but it's basically this road right here that goes by River of Life Church. At some point, it is planned to connect back into the city's business park. But at this point, there is a gap there. It doesn't fully connect. The challenge, of course, is the fact that these two roads, they don't line up. And even worse than that, they don't line up in the proper direction, okay? So in traffic engineering, we talk about being offset properly and offset incorrectly. This is offset incorrectly because if you want to take a left here, which you're not supposed to,
Right.
but lots of people do, okay? If you want to take a left there, and if you want to take a left here, they overlap.
Yeah.
Okay? If they were offset in the other direction, it wouldn't be an issue, but they're not, okay? So the question has been for a number of years, how do we fix this? Okay? We've looked at it from several different approaches. One of them is is by far the most expensive, probably the least practical. To give you some points of reference here, Gum Branch Road is this road here. Plantation is off to the left. Existing New Frontier Way is down in here, okay? And the project, this alternative would basically realign New Frontier Way to tie into Plantation with a traffic signal. The issue there, of course, is we've got a house in the way, and we've also got a very expensive stormwater pond in the way. So this is an option that we're looking at. I'm not saying that it's an impractical option. It certainly can happen, but at the same time, it's very expensive. It is most definitely the most expensive out of all these options. Option number 2, Gum Branch Road is basically oriented the same way. Plantation's on the left. You can see that New Frontier Way, it remains on the right. This option right here would basically have a signal, 2 signals, okay? And you would be able to turn left out of here, but you would not be able to turn left in, okay? The left turning movement for the center lane is reserved for Plantation, which is by far the higher volume movement. This one just won't work. I don't know what else to say. I mean, you know, it's one of those things when you're
I live up there and I try to figure out how you pull that off, because I can't do it.
I mean, this was one of our engineers getting creative with options, and we try to look at all options because you don't want to predetermine the outcome. But when you sit and you look at this and you think about how it actually operate, and it's not a good option for us. Okay. Last option is probably the most practical, but it also restricts turning options the most, at least for New Frontier Way. Technically, right now, New Frontier Way is a right-in, right-out driveway. People don't treat it like that, but technically it is, okay? We did a signal warrant analysis for Plantation Boulevard about a month ago. Signal is warranted there. So this option would basically have us installing a traffic signal at a 3-leg intersection with a median here along Gum Branch Road. Now, the median may or may not be needed, but I think this is the preferred alternative, at least at this point. The volumes comparatively, here on New Frontier versus Plantation Drive, I mean, they're just nowhere close. I mean, you're talking about a few hundred people a day versus several thousand. I mean, you probably get 10,000 vehicles a day out of Plantation. So
Sundays you get about 10,000 out of the churches down there. Believe me.
out of both of them,
Yeah.
they're
Yeah,
streaming
yeah.
out. So, in that particular case, that would be a good reason for us to maybe not do the median, okay? Because they do, if I understand correctly, and I believe I've seen this
Center
before.
lane to get in there.
They also hire someone to direct traffic for them, right? And so, if that person was out there 24/7, we wouldn't have this problem, but they're not, right? So, it's likely that we're going to pursue the traffic signal, and in fact, DOT has tentatively said they have money for it, okay? But it's also unlikely that we would pursue the median. That gives us a little bit more flexibility in handling those Sunday peak periods when churches coming in and going out.
You build another big church out there, so yeah, you're gonna have
We're
some
building another one.
Well, and I'm not really sure what the River of Life long-term plans are because, as you know, they're building a new church just north of
Right.
the CVS over there on Gum Branch. So
There you go again.
this is a good interim solution, but some type of long-term solution, has to come about eventually. Questions, concerns? Did I answer the question, first of all, that you had from last meeting?
You did.
Okay, Good.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that.
Okay.
I know you think of, but one more question with you.
Yes, ma'am.
Why is it that they're jamming up everything over on that side and downtown, everything is closing up? CVS, there's no grocery store down on that side. Here's City Hall sitting here and you can't even find a grocery store or, what do you call
Drugstore.
a drugstore for the seniors there.
You know, I wish I had an answer for you, but I'll tell you that the city's focus is downtown. You know, we're trying to recruit opportunities like that in the downtown area. You know, we're looking to redevelop New Bridge Street. You know, we're investing in tons of infrastructure down here, landscaping, you know, various events that we put on. We're trying to draw people down, but you know, the market is what it is, and it's telling a lot of those folks that they need to be on Western Boulevard with everybody else right now.
Well, 'cause they can't be getting off base on Friday afternoon to get over on Western Boulevard to Steak and Ale. You can't even, I mean, it's just like flies. We went on base, Saturday? I had to go get my medicine, and it was like, where are the people? They all out on Western Boulevard.
Yes, they are.
There's no one on base.
I can tell you for certain that they're on Western Boulevard.
They are. I'm serious because I don't take it. I was in the ambulance and they was flying with me down there. And the lady had to stop. She said, move, 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 move. They trying to take me to the neighbor hospital. I'm saying to myself, this is crazy. I got to get out of here. And then I'm saying to myself, but I'm trying to say that if you build a town, when we was in Michigan, you have urban blight. When you leave from one side of the city and go to the other, here this part goes down, everybody wants to go to something new. When that wears out, they move on to something else new. And then you got urban blight, urban blight, urban blight. That's what happens in the cities. And I like to see when I moved here, Western Boulevard didn't exist.
Right.
Now it's just like
That was
crazy.
a long time ago, wasn't that, Gloria?
Long time ago.
Well, I think,
Never mind, ma'am, I knew it was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago.
just to bookend that point, you know, this committee alone, plus everything else that the city is doing, I think emphasizes that we're trying to maybe not reverse that process, but certainly counteract it so that we can get more activity in the downtown area and emphasize places that used to be the center of Jacksonville, like New Bridge Street, like New River.
Right. Because the only thing I'm saying, like tomorrow, I'll go to the Beirut Memorial. The people and friends that we know come into town, the first thing they asked, some lady, she was lost. She came from Havelock. She said, where do we go? And I said, you got to go on the other side of town. She said, there's nothing down here that we can go and eat, you know, to have food before they went back because they came down for the Beirut Memorial ceremony. There's a lot of people that come into town for that, especially the ones that come back because of that Beirut Memorial and the other things that they have over there. But there's nothing for them to, no place to go to eat or nothing like that unless they go over across town. So I drew a little map and told them, take that road and get
That
over
certainly will change in the future.
I hope so.
Mr. Chairman, that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Appreciate that, Anthony.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
We'll go on to the next agenda item, transportation presentation by Ms. Dina Tribble.
Well, good evening, and continuing what Anthony started with transportation, we're actually going to talk about the Americans with Disabilities Act and the transition plan. So I think most of us are familiar with what ADA is. It's a law that became effective in 1990, got further amended in 2008. It consists of 5 titles, and Title II is an emphasis on public facilities or entities such as the City of Jacksonville. So the purpose of ADA is to mandate the elimination of discrimination against those with disabilities, to ensure that all of our programs, activities, communications are accessible, and that we are doing what we can to ensure that there's no barriers. It addresses some standards for addressing this discrimination. It also establishes the government's role in enforcing these standards, such as through building codes, etc., and the congressional authority to address any discrimination. In January of 2017, the North Carolina Department of Transportation notified the city that they were going to be evaluating the city's ADA plan, and that they were beginning their evaluation process with cities that were greater than 50,000 in population. And since the city is a recipient of federal funding, it is their task to ensure that we are meeting and enforcing the guidance of ADA. And so this isn't anything new to the city. We've had ADA plans in effect, beginning when its adoption in 1990. So we had the first plan around 1992. It got updated again in 2013. And with the 2013 plan, we actually made a requirement that we would be updating it formally every 5 years and evaluating what that plan looks like. And that brings us what today's plan that we're going to talk about. So in the new mandate that we were issued, we made some changes, and it required the designation of an ADA coordinator, somebody who would be responsible for ensuring compliance with the plan and being the single point of contact with those that are requesting an accommodation or those who are maybe had a question or concern about a facility or a curb ramp, sidewalk, etc. It also designated a, quote, responsible person, someone who was going to be charged with ensuring that we had the plan, that we were meeting the goals and the milestones. And it also, and I think this is critical for us, is that it had developed a plan to actually inventory all of our assets. So we were notified in January of this year by NCDOT that we are in compliance with the federal law. They found our plan to be complete. And in that plan, we actually identified what we're calling phase one and for some of these improvements or some of our short-term implementation strategies, and that we were going to have these done by January of 2020. So what does the plan look like? So again, we just modernized it. So the law hasn't changed. It has changed a little bit. So we expanded the old 2008 guidance. And this time we really focused on communications, public buildings, and right-of-ways. And we're going to talk about what each of those three areas are in just a minute. And then it also established a process to update the plan, to monitor the plan, establish the schedule, and identified roles and responsibilities of who was going to be responsible for ensuring that within the city of Jacksonville. I mean, as you know, there's several departments, and all of us are charged with a certain small piece of that, and so together this plan brings us all together to ensure that we're working as one towards making these accomplishments. So the three areas that we looked at are communication, public buildings, and rights-of-way. And so communications, think of that any way that we communicate an event, a meeting. It could be both in writing, orally. It could be any of our public social media, Facebook, Twitter. So all of these, we have to ensure that we are taking into consideration those who might have a disability and making sure that we have accessible accommodations if they're asked. So for instance, if we have something such as this plan, if someone approached us and they wanted us, that they had difficulty in, and they wanted to either verbally hear it or if they needed it in Braille, we need to make that accommodation. And so that was part of the communications aspect, is really diving into what do we currently do and are we making sure that those accommodations are available to those who might need it. The second component we looked at was public buildings. And the heading's a little misleading, but think of it as when we say public buildings, it's all of our public parking lots, how the handicap parking spaces, the accessible pathway from when you park to get into the building. Once you're in the building, all of the areas that are considered public, are they accessible? Is the threshold, if someone was in a wheelchair, can they get into the door? Are the restrooms accessible? So you go through making sure that there's the grab bars and everything like that, the door width is meeting the standards, etc. So we did an evaluation of all of our public assets to make sure, where are we? Or do we meet the requirements or do we not? And then the last component is the rights of way, the public rights of way. And this is anything dealing with, anything within sidewalks, curb ramps, trails. So as you're walking on a sidewalk, the sidewalk might have been installed back in 1990 when it got approved, but guess what? It doesn't meet today's standards. And so we needed to go back as part of this plan and identify that we need, in certain areas, you are required that you have to have a passing zone. So we have to go back in and retrofit some of our sidewalks that don't meet the standards of today. That's what this plan does. This plan allowed us to evaluate what we have, identify our shortcomings, and identify areas of improvement. And so again, all this plan is a continuation of the efforts to date, but more importantly, it really gave us the starting point of our inventory. And that's kind of what we were lacking in the past. Now we have a starting, like a benchmark, and we're gonna continue building on this benchmark over the next 5 years. So as our committee internally, we're gonna be charged with developing that responsibility of continuing the assessment. It was a lot to inventory, so we made a little start. We're gonna continue building upon that every year. Through the plan, we present the city manager with a formal update every year, and every 5 years it goes back to city council for a more comprehensive plan. And also with this plan, we identified a public input. You know, we want feedback. We can't see everything. I mean, we didn't do this in a bubble by any means. We had that group of, about 15 city staff members that were putting this together, but we need feedback. We need to see, maybe you're familiar with an area that we didn't capture very well initially. We need to put that in our strategy. So I mentioned before, we identified both short-term and long-term implementation strategies. Short-term would be the ones that we felt we could really accomplish within the next year and a half, before that 2020 deadline that I mentioned. And so in the 3 areas that we talked about, communications, the training component is really training our staff, those who post things on the internet or the internet or Facebook, those who maybe send out meeting notifications, making sure that they're trained with what the current ADA standards are, making sure that we have the appropriate font size, that all of our notifications state that if you need an accommodation to please call the ADA coordinator, etc. And then on their buildings component, we noticed that we haven't been doing a very good job of keeping up with some of our pavement markings. And I think you saw in one of those pictures, we had one that was really nice and pretty. The lines were very noticeable, and the other one maybe not so good. Well, we need to go back and refresh those pavement markings, make sure that we have that accessible pathway into the building as stated, make sure that we have all of the appropriate handicap placards are posted at the correct heights, etc. And then you'll see in there that piece about Kerr Street. So it was kind of interesting when we were looking at the inventory. There was a small piece of sidewalk at Kerr Street that if we would put that small piece of sidewalk in, it provided that connectivity from the main sidewalk to the interior of the park. And it was something like that we hadn't really thought about in the past, but this plan made us focus on that. That's the type of strategies that we're looking at. And so that was a very small piece that we can do, and we went ahead and put that in the short-term strategy. And then under the right-of-way, I don't know if you're familiar with what truncated domes are, but they're the warning mats at an intersection. So the sidewalk will depress down into the street, and the truncated domes or the warning mats, it's a visual cue when someone is blind or their dog. When they have the cane, it hits that and it notifies them that there is an impending hazard road condition, either an intersection. Like an intersection at a street, or you've got some type of hazardous condition. It's a warning symbol. So in the past, again, when we were doing the plan, these truncated domes, the method of installment was lay down the concrete, and then once the concrete's cured, after the fact, you'd put down this rubber mat with 4, I'll call them screws. Mm-hmm. Well, over time, and trucks jumping the curb, those mats are no longer in existence. And so we identified several locations, intersections, that we could go in and retrofit and put the truncated domes back. So that's what that first project is. And then the last one is the curb ramps. This is actually a great opportunity. DOT notified us they had some funding available. City staff identified over 100 curb ramps that they could be paid. They could help pay for, if not all in its entirety, in the areas that we have already identified. So we are working with them to start that process, but we are very hopeful that that project will get started within the next year or so. So throughout this whole process, we'll be continuing that conversation with DOT to see what other opportunities for them. We like spending their money, so we'll be working with them to see other areas where we could install curb ramps throughout the city. And then the long-term implementation strategy, we found that some of these we did a very good job at. So those of you might already know this, but the city of Jacksonville has a capital improvement plan, and last year they expanded it to 10 years. And so this plan identifies large investments that the city's going to make, and with that, we take maybe it's an existing building or infrastructure, or it might be a new building, and we build it to today's standards. And so we've already identified some of the shortcomings that we have in the plan. We've already identified in the long-range plan to take care of that. So under the ADA transition plan, we made a note to correlate that those efforts exist. We also continue this effort with NCDOT through their coordination. They also have a capital improvement plan, they call it the STIP, the State Transportation Improvement Plan. And so through those projects, as Anthony mentioned before, you see all that communication and coordination and these projects. We continue that effort on any of those projects as well as their annual resurfacing contract. And then the big project for us under communication is how do we convert G10, this meeting today, right now, it's live. How do we convert that to make sure that we can offer closed captioning? And so our media group's been working on that over the last year or so, and we're hoping to have a solution as to how we can get that underway in the next year or so. So those are some of the long-term implementation strategies that we've identified. And so as Anthony mentioned, we have our kickoff information public input session tomorrow in this room, starting at 4 o'clock. We welcome you to come back and we can ask some more questions, answer questions. We want some feedback from the public. We also are going to be taking all of the feedback and comments that we received, and we're going to present to council hopefully around November 20th. And as I previously stated, that this is an updated process. This is something that's a continual effort. It doesn't stop tonight, and it doesn't stop in a year. This is something that we're going to be continuing to build on for the years to come. So that being said, does anyone have any questions about the ADA plan?
Has it been presented to the ONSO Commission for Persons with Disabilities? Or?
No, thank you for asking. We have emailed them, notifying them about tomorrow's meeting. Also extended an invitation that we'd be more than happy to do a presentation to their board. So if
because they meet in this room on the first Wednesday of every month.
Certainly do.
Yep, and we've been meeting with Carmen Miracle as well. So I think she conveyed to them also that we'd be happy to do that. So maybe we'll reach out to them.
That is a citizen group made up of people, primarily people who are affected by various types of disabilities, particularly in motion, things of that nature. So that would be a good group to get feedback from.
And that is an excellent point. We will reach out to them. They're probably the advocate group for folks with disabilities in all of Onslow County. So they are definitely at the top of our list, and we will be working with them through this process.
I just have one quick question. Is there a distinction between handicapped and van accessible?
Yes.
There is, and I've noticed there's not many van accessibles in town. So if you got a person who needs to roll off the truck right into the store, we don't have that in a lot of places.
Correct. Yeah, the van accessible, it's a wider parking spot than just a handicap. But I'm not quite sure with the requirements as far as how many van accessible versus handicap.
I think it's the population dynamic somebody needs to take a research on. I think it's, I figure I just came from Florida, I was watching theirs, and they have a van accessible about every 2 handicap positions.
So the challenge that we face right now is that, you know, some of the ADA issues that face our community are specifically the city's responsibility, and then others are areas that we influence but aren't necessarily directly our responsibility. So for instance, like if you go to Walmart, you know, when we get, Gloria does not go to Walmart. Okay, let's go somewhere else. We can't go to Kmart anymore, so let's go to Target.
That's right, Kmart's
Okay, so if you go to Target, right, when Target was built, the handicap spaces were designed to that standard, or to a standard at that one point in time when it was constructed, okay? That's when we get the pass at it, okay? From there, it's challenging for us to keep up with that. We certainly do have a way to do that, and we work with business owners when, you know, things have fallen out of standard for them to be brought back up to standard, but that's not something that we have direct authority over. We can't make them do something like that. What we're focusing on with this plan are the assets that we control. So all of our park facilities, all of our city streets, City Hall, for instance, Center for Public Safety. And to tell you the truth, we've done a really good job with this in the past. And in fact, DOT was exceptionally complimentary of us and our efforts to date, as well as what we're doing today, you know, with upgrading the transition plan, because other communities have not embraced this. Other communities have just kind of, so we are kind of the golden standard in DOT's eyes now, and they are referring other communities to us to learn how to better approach things like this. So just a couple of concluding thoughts here. Again, we do a good job in this, but there's always room for improvement. And what we found out here is that there are some things that we can do over the short term that'll get us long ways towards additional compliance. But just like a lot of other things in government, this is more of a marathon type of issue than it is a sprint. So over, you know, the next 10, 20, even 30 years, because our infrastructure is so large, we will still be working on ADA compliance. It's something that we feel serious about and that the city council obviously supports because they have in the past, but it's not something that we're going to take down within the next 5 years.
Understood.
And I would like to elaborate, I didn't make this clear. On our city's webpage is more information about the whole plan. The plan's actually 233 pages, but don't get, the plan itself was only about 30, and I made copies of it over there. The back part of the plan is all the data. So if you're interested in the entire plan, you can go to our website. It's right on the homepage, so jacksonvillenc.gov. If you are interested in just what the plan stated, there's some copies over there, and feel free to take some.
Thank you.
So as community leaders, the only ask that we have of you tonight is take a look at it. If you have some spare time, give us feedback. Also, please share it with your constituents, because the more feedback we get, the better the plan's going to be and the better we can address the need out there.
Thank you, folks. I appreciate that, transportation. As we carry on, we go to planning board update. Mrs. Steve.
Planning Board, September 10th, we had no meeting, no agenda items. October 8th, we did. We recommended to council an approval of a special use permit for a new Verizon tower off of Broad Street Road. Now, that's actually very close and associated with the American Legion area. So that particular tower would provide increased continuity for almost all within the apartment complexes there, all of Camp Geiger, New River Air Station, heading out on the southwest side of town. And there was not an appropriate tower where they could just put their equipment, so it's all brand new construction. And it is in a wetlands area, not good for anything else, but it is good for the tower.
And Steve, if I might clarify, is that Broadhurst Road?
Broadhurst Road, yes. Where the American Legion, and it's in the back of, in the woods.
In the woods.
Yeah.
Behind the fairgrounds, the old
Yes.
fairgrounds.
Yes.
The Armory.
Yes.
Back and behind it.
Mhm. And it's not in the flight plans of anything, and basically one of the nearest chain link is Camp Geiger.
Pretty close. All right. Anything else in that?
That's all.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it. Ms. Jackson, turn it over for you on update of Community Development Subcommittee meeting.
Good evening, everyone. Our subcommittee, we met on October 10th, and we had a very productive meeting. Wanted to go over some information as far as the 5-year plan. We are in the initial planning stages for that. We have a draft of our schedule that we're going to be taking as far as meetings. And of course, you all are invited to come to all of our meetings. You're going to be getting notifications. One of the things that we're going to, that we've already done is for schedule our first consolidated planning meeting is going to be held on November 13th. at the Trent River Okie Grove Missionary Baptist Association, the headquarter building at 6 o'clock. That's over there in Georgetown. So we're gonna be going over getting some community input on our comp plan on how we should use our federal funds in spending that in this community. We're also gonna be planning for our fair housing plan that is due next year. So that is going to coincide in some of the meetings to ensure that we do a great job in promoting fair housing, and we're also gonna get input on how we can do a better job in our fair housing plan. Now, also, we went over some projects, our rehabs coming along. We're completing that, and we're getting ready to go out to bid on one of the rehabs, but we're gonna be completing 3 of those within the next 2 to 3 weeks. We have a demolition that's going to be completed with 1633 Lejeune Boulevard, and we also added 103 Westminster to the list, and the Jacksonville Fire Department, they say that they would like to inspect to see whether or not they can use that for a live burn training exercise. So they're gonna be giving me that input as well. This is usually the time where they take advantage of the cooler weather and train their firefighters in putting out those fires. We also continue on having our home buyers at 124 Newberry Street and 310 Sherwood Road to complete the final phases so that they can become brand new homeowners. And as far as our capital improvement projects, the Jack and Miette bathroom project is moving along, it's moving forward. But the sidewalk project that we have in Georgetown, it may be delayed depending on other priorities, funding needs due to Hurricane Florence. So there may be some other needs that we may need to assess before we can move forward. But we're doing all that we can to move forward and get the preliminary work done for that sidewalk project. Wanted to also just tell you briefly about the Hurricane Florence recovery funding and efforts. We have been in contact with HUD to make sure that all of the community responses to Hurricane Florence, they have been addressed. Of course, FEMA right now, they're in the community allocating resources, and those funds will have to be used first before we can use our monies for the storm damage. So if anyone is affected by the hurricane, I do encourage you all to contact FEMA and make sure that you get your applications in and get all of the resources that you can to them so that they can be able to assist you.
Can I say something, Tracy?
Yes.
One thing I'm running into is people doing the application, then they get denied, tell other people, and they don't even try to do an application. You gotta understand it's a case-by-case basis. Also, that there's a deadline too, right?
Yes.
And it's coming up November 17th, is that?
November 16th.
16th. So they gotta go ahead and try to beat that deadline as well. Just wanna add that.
Okay. So we do know that the disaster recovery team from HUD came from Greensboro, the headquarters building in Greensboro, and they were at the Dixon School shelters, and they were giving out some disaster recovery funds after they went through the FEMA process. So they were all in the same building, and when they moved from one area, they could be able to assist them in relocating them and getting them some funds to go and find housing in other areas. So that happened while, in this recovery period that we had. And also, they shared that there may be some disaster recovery funds available that's in the future, but it has not been finalized by HUD and Congress and those folks. So HUD is aware, HUD has been in the community, and they're still going to be in the community for some time for this recovery. We also discussed about a one city moment. Of course, one of the community members wanted to make sure that the city employees, they were recognized on their efforts. And of course, the city council, they met on October the 2nd, and they showed highlights of the community efforts in response to the hurricane, to include the entire community. Wanted to remind you that the next subcommittee is going to be at 10 a.m. on Wednesday, December 2nd. And also, our next home buyer education course will be held November 17th here in this room, meeting rooms A and B at City Hall. It's from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Please call 910-938-5286 to register for the class. The cost of the class is $10 per person.
Can you send out an email on that, ma'am?
I will.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I need to be excused.
December 12th for the next CD committee, subcommittee member meeting.
Only because we're talking about homes as such right now at this point. I think most people are aware that the base had about 350 units damaged. I mean, that's what was reported. Last week, they also sent out letters telling all retirees and civil service employees living on the base that they had 30 days to vacate. Now, I don't know if you're going to get calls on this, Tracy. I do know that at this time, according to home buyers and the association, that there's not a lot of rental units left in the area.
That is right. Just talking with the HUD representation that came to the homeless shelter, some people, they relocated 40 miles from their jobs just to find housing. So it is, you're right, Steve, it is a shortage of housing because of the flooding.
But can I add that FEMA has approved temporary solutions such as the RV trailers and the mobile homes that they're gonna be bringing in, so those that would like that option, that has been authorized, so those.
Where's that gonna be located?
It will be located either on their personal property, on their private property, or another location yet to be determined that the city will allow mobile homes to go into. So as those requests come in, we're responding. I know we've already issued a first permit for a travel trailer in someone's yard, so they're staying there while their homes are renovated. Because the housing market is really bad. I, as a real estate agent in my part-time job, I have been trying to show houses over the weekend, and they are going in hours. You call, you schedule a showing, they'll call you back, they'll approve it, then they'll call you back and tell you it's gone. And so they are moving fast, especially if they're in any kind of decent condition. So those options are gonna be made, they have already been made available, and that information we as a city have been putting out on our social media, letting citizens know that if you need a temporary housing solution, such as a RV or a mobile home, we're providing those numbers.
Yeah, and what I'm bringing up though is these 500 retired in civil service, they don't have a piece of ground.
You're right.
That's right.
They're being asked to, well, they're being told to leave the base. You know, so.
They said Cherry Point was too.
Yeah, Cherry Point was also. They got
how many
letters,
up
too.
there at Slocum Village, so.
Yeah.
Watch out.
Yeah, we had this down at Sandy Run, we've got to let 72 people go. We're trying to find houses for that.
In their lease that they have to leave.
Well, if you remember, I
Of
was
course,
reminding
the web
people of
apartments.
Katrina. That's when we first heard of Katrina houses, and the small, just basic, minimal to put a roof and shelter over your head. That's what we're gonna, I see where we're going with that, with those numbers.
So if you know people who are living in their homes and their homes are not, because that's what they have to live in. They have no other place to go, they have children, who would they contact?
FEMA. FEMA is the first point of contact for everything. When you get a denial letter, it's not necessarily that you've been denied. You've been denied right now because you haven't filed your insurance. If you have renter's insurance, homeowner's insurance, you file that first. Then you have to apply for an SBA loan and then get denied, and then you come to FEMA. FEMA is actually the third leg of the wheel, but they're the first point where you register. Because you have to have a FEMA number when you've gone through all of that to come back to FEMA and show, I don't have insurance, I didn't get approved for SBA, and now FEMA steps in. And so that's where some of the miscommunication has come from. But you do want to apply to FEMA before that deadline, because after that, you will not have an opportunity.
That's the November 16th.
That's the November 16th deadline. So save that letter that says denied, because you can come back around once you've pursued all the other options that are available to you.
You're gonna need those denial letters to even come to me for disaster recovery. So make sure that they go through and they get all 3 of those denial letters, and then they'll be able to qualify.
Because they're the gap, and they're just, FEMA is only basic needs. It is not to replace everything you lost in your house. It's not to replace your, the literature I'm getting and reviewing, your TVs, your dishwashers. It is your, your roof, your plumbing, electrical, to make the unit safe.
When I spoke to some of the people who've gotten some FEMA assistance, they're not gonna get the hardwood floors, they're gonna get the linoleum floors. They're not gonna get the big deck that they have, they're gonna get steps just to get into their house. So it's very basic as far as what FEMA is going to replace.
Thank you, Ms. Tracy. Anything else, ma'am?
That's all I have.
Appreciate that. Ms. Pamela Tufton, community engagement update, ma'am?
Good evening, everyone. How are you? Hi. So, first slide. All right, so we have with Country Club Villas update. October was a busy month for us in Country Club Villas. First, we had a residents meeting on October 8th. That was the first meeting that we held specifically for those that actually live in the neighborhood of Country Club Villas. If you're not familiar with Country Club Villas, it's formerly known as Myrtlewood Circle. So in the process of rebranding and focusing on the image of the neighborhood, we are calling it by its rightful name, Country Club Villas. The residents meetings, we did not have a lot in attendance. We met at Coastal Carolina. Partly could be from still gathering themselves from Hurricane Florence or just leery about coming out right now. But we are working with them just as we've worked with Bayshore Estates and Belfort Homes. October 16th, we had a property owners meeting that was well attended. It was actually a crime-free lease training that was held by Officer Copeland Mills. His main focus was letting the owners know that they do have a right, they do have the opportunity to take care of the tenants that's in their properties. They're not in a standstill situation if they have tenants that are creating crime situations, or they're not just a tenant that you would love to have in your property. So he gave them a crime-free lease addendum that gives them a little bit more leverage if they need to evict somebody that was arrested or based off of any criminal activity. So that addendum has a little bit more stronger language than what's in your normal lease. If they were not present, or if anybody needs a copy of it, if you're a landlord yourself, then just let us know. We can get a copy of that for you as well.
You said arrested, not convicted, right?
Arrested, yes. So you can have somebody arrested. I mean, you can have somebody evicted based off of an arrest. Yeah, because one of the things that, the questions that came up from it is, if somebody's been arrested and then they turn around and post bond or bail, and they're now able to come back into your property. So it doesn't stop them from returning to your property. But this addendum now gives you extra verbiage to take down to the magistrate to say, this person, my tenant has been arrested and I want them evicted from the property.
And we're talking about for like serious crime, not I had a couple parking tickets, they picked me up.
Well, it could be.
Let me add a caveat to this. Anything in the lease that is subject to eviction is still a decision of that landlord to enforce. Right. So they will make a decision if that arrest is serious enough where they want to
Oh,
evict.
man.
But what it does is give them an opportunity that they may not have now. One of the reasons this has come up is because when we've had our community meetings, they reported criminal activity, criminal activity, criminal activity. And their perception is that if the police come through and arrest, then that person can be evicted. Well, no, the police can arrest, they cannot evict. So even though they've been arrested, they've been charged, they bonded out, they're going right back. And that will continue, even if they went to jail and served time, you still can come back and rent if a landlord allows you to come back. So what we've tried to communicate to the landlords, to truly solve the criminal activity problem, you're gonna have to address it from the landlord and being more selective and proactive in who you allow in those units. So they have the right to contact the police department, find out the number of calls for service, kind of issues that are going on their property, and then they can take the action that they need to take. And it's not just the police department that can solve the problem. So that's why we've given them this tool, so should they desire to use it, they can use it.
There's a problem with that, and the problem with that is an arrest is simply that. There's a presumption of innocence and due process that is completely skipped with an arrest. A conviction is very different. You can be arrested, if you can be falsely accused of something and arrested.
And that's my
And so
concern.
giving someone the power to throw you out of your home because you've been arrested, someone can have you arrested and you can be proven completely innocent later. And now you've been evicted based on complete false allegations. That's the problem with that.
And let me say this to you. You have situations now in public housing, for example, where if your guest cause a problem and cause the police to show up at your door, you can be evicted. You can have loud music at your unit, you can be evicted. A landlord can evict you pretty much for any reason they want to, except discriminatory reasons, because you're black, or because you're white, or because you're disabled. But they can, if you sign a lease and agreeing that if my friends cause problems, I gotta go, you have entered into a private party arrangement to accept that unit under those terms. If you don't want to live by those rules, then you rent somewhere else. And so really, it's a contract, mutually agreed upon terms that you willingly enter into. And so that's what we are. You have loud parties, neighbors are complaining, you can be evicted. And another thing that we reminded them of, your lease does not automatically renew. I don't even really have to evict you. I could just agree that I don't want to renew at the end of the year. So there are a lot of ways that this criminal activity situation can be addressed. Doesn't even have to be criminal in nature. I could just take my house off the market. I don't have to rent it at all. And what people don't realize is housing is not a right. It is a privilege. It is not required in this country for you to have a house. It's not. It's just required that if I choose to rent one, I won't discriminate against you and how I interact with you. But there is not a requirement in this country that anybody rent to you if they choose not to. And that's why we have to protect those opportunities, because those doors can close. And when they close, then we have a homeless situation. And I don't think people realize that. Your credit is an issue. That's right. You can be denied housing for poor credit. So there are a lot of other barriers to housing, and the only way that we can overcome it is we each take personal responsibility to protect, make sure we have a roof over our head.
Pamela, you got anything else?
I do.
All right.
So with that, to tagging on to more of what Ms. Gray was saying, bringing up the fact that their leases do not have to be renewed. A lot of the homeowners were not aware that they did not have to renew a lease each time, or the fact that they could, when the lease expired, that they had an opportunity to run a background check again, to run a credit check, because everything may have been okay for the person from the very beginning, but a year later some things could have changed. And knowing that that was an option for them was an eye-opener. So even as, if anyone's a landlord in here as well, if you're doing it privately, you know, those are rights and opportunities to you as a landlord. So that was the biggest thing, and he really stressed about the focus on active management, to where you're not a landlord that's just accepting money. So if you're always just accepting rent every month, but you're never interacting with your tenants, or if you're not actively engaged with the tenant, visiting their property, then that's where you're not being an active landlord. By being an active landlord, you can enter your property anytime you want to if you have that in your lease. Or if you have it in your lease, you have to give them 24-hour notice. You can do that as well. But if you put in your lease that I have the right to come in any time of the day, then by all means, you have the right to go to your property at any time during that day, whenever. All right. Any questions? Also on the property owners, they sent letters as concerned property owners to 3 addresses in the property that have had a lot of calls for service from the Jacksonville Police Department. They did a petition, so to speak, of property owner to say that these 3 properties have come up countless times through Jacksonville Police Department, or we've had issues with the tenants that are currently there. And we want to make you aware of it as neighbor to neighbor. They all signed on it. We sent it out. We gave them copies of how many calls for service was actually from each property, so that way they could see exactly what type of calls are coming from their addresses. The hopes is that they'll become an active landlord and take whatever necessary steps they have to take to help make the neighborhood better than what they're currently seeing at this time. The overall goal is to make it where each neighbor is taking care of the property with each other without feeling like it has to be policed by the city or by the police department. Yes, sir.
What is a remedy for tenants that might be having problems with their landlords where they're not actually taking care of the property?
Well, you have, if the tenant has issues with the landlords, the first thing that the tenant has to make sure they do is have it in writing. So without it in writing, it becomes a they said versus they said. After so many attempts of it being in writing and given, depending on what the issue is, they have to give the landlord a reasonable time to fix whatever the issue is. So if it's something that needs to be fixed, you can't write the letter on Monday and say Friday, okay, you didn't take care of X, Y, and Z, so now we're moving out. Because that's not a reasonable time for the landlord to come out and inspect the property, do whatever estimates they need to do, and then move forward. Of course, you would hope that the communication would come out between the landlord and the tenant, which would let the tenant then know something is being done. After so many issues of it not being done, they can either take it up to the Fair Housing Committee in Raleigh, or they can actually approach a judge for what's called a summary ejectment, which means that they have proof of everything in writing, and then they are asking the judge to constructively evict them from the property. Now, what the tenant cannot do is stop paying rent. Because as soon as the tenant stops paying rent, they have canceled their contract. And now,
They have violated the lease.
yeah, they have violated their lease by not paying their rent. And even if the landlord is not doing what they're supposed to be doing, just the fact that the tenant stopped paying rent now gives the landlord right to evict them from the property.
And in addition to that, Councilman, we also, they can call our code enforcement office as well. And when there are disputes that are not code enforcement related, we also give them the number to the legal aid office of North Carolina. So depending on their income and what they can afford, there are some resources there that they can get a lawyer involved, legal assistance to help them deal with the landlord.
Thank you.
So next we have New River update. With New River, we have a copy of the map as well to show what's identified as New River. On your calendars, save November 19th at 6:00 p.m. That is going to be a community input meeting for New River residents and business owners. So it's going to be at 6:00 at Live and Hope Community Church, which is the church right across from the duplexes on the right-hand side, next to the entryway to social services.
And could I add, Steve, you had asked for some data on the number of the different parcels and
The other units.
yes, what this is showing you is this red is all of the town center apartments, and the blue is represents others. And we have 349 other property owners out there. Some of them own more than one piece. As I looked at the data, the largest was, one person owns 15, 14, 11, and then it drops down to like 5, 3, 2, 1, so.
And Lily, that's a mix of homes and apartments?
Yes, well, yeah, the pink is all homes. And
Okay,
then you
okay,
got
gotcha.
duplexes, some of these are those duplexes and some are single-family homes.
I'm making around without getting lost.
That's old
That-
base housing.
That it, ma'am?
That concludes my report.
Thank you, appreciate your time. We now go into One City, Our City, and City Moment. The advisory committee members are asked to allow a moment where all members may reflect on One City campaign, which promotes respect, caring, and collaboration between all citizens.
And I wanted to share, as a One City, item this month, we did go out at Country Club Dealers on Saturday and wanted to show you some highlights. This is our very own. Our servant leader, Dr. Richard Woodruff.
Hardworking
This is
man.
some, Gary, and of course, Dr. Woodruff in the background there.
Yep, there you
And we won't say who that is.
go. I think that's.
All right.
And then this is a group shop, wide shop. I can't tell, I think that's Carrie, Terrell, and some other folks out there.
That's a resident.
A resident.
Yeah, that's a resident in front of the ladder.
Okay.
And then that's
Okay.
Officer Mills holding the ladder and Mr. Massey on top of the ladder.
We let Ron on the ladder?
Yeah, he got up.
Yeah, he's driving the vines.
Yeah, another just shot of that. Officers were out engaging. This is a group of,
That's
kids,
irreverent.
irreverent warriors.
So that's Irreverent Warriors, the group that initiated the cleanup. So they're known for doing the Silkies Run that they do in April.
All right.
There's another, some residents actually came out and helped. Pamela there on Pushmore.
Yeah, it's the old school, just the blades.
That's a
Where'd
workout.
you
That's some
find
real work,
that?
isn't it?
One of the residents had it,
Oh my
and I've
goodness.
never used one, so I said, let me try it out, and
Oh,
workout.
man.
And you know, it was
That's the
quite,
only type of
it
friendly.
was quite interesting
Difficult to
because
use.
we asked him if we could use his lawnmower, and he said he didn't have a lawnmower. And one of the reasons because it's very difficult to access the rear of the units to store anything. Anything you take in your backyard in this neighborhood, you have to take it through your house. And so to pull a lawnmower in and out, he just said, I don't have one, so he had the little push mower, which is contributing to some of the issues that we see in the neighborhood, just not being able to easily access the rear of the yards unless you're on an in unit.
And that was a resident with the weed eater.
This didn't show up good, but this was a recreation staff and partnership for children. They had activities for the kids that came out and information on recreation services. We had a great time. And it looks a lot, it looks so, I don't want to say a lot. Drive through there this week, you would know, it's a noticeable difference. Really proud of what's
I think some other organization had some community events. I think our church had a modified Harvest a Blessing where we gave away stuff to people who really needed it. So we opened our warehouses up and got that out there. What do you have, Council?
Just a reminder, on the 24th, right now is the deadline to make sure your debris, your horticulture, vegetation is put out. Possibly all those big trucks that we see taking all the large debris will be leaving out of here and more than likely headed to Florida. So we want to get that out because after that, we can't handle all of that stuff with our equipment, and then there might be some charges that come with that.
Yeah.
So just wanted to, October 24th, which is Wednesday.
It's Wednesday.
I will tell you this, it's $40 to pick
Same
up a
day.
nice load because I had to do it a couple times. So I'm gonna say, if you can get it out now, get it out now.
Okay, that's what I gotta do. I have something too.
Yes, ma'am.
Tomorrow, what is it? Not tomorrow, Wednesday, 24th. We have 100 first responders and volunteers or something coming down from Winston-Salem.
They're here.
They're here, I know they got here today, I think.
They got here Sunday.
We're
night.
supposed to feed them on Commerce Road Wednesday, so we have to cook, take the food over there. Our church do First Baptist, so I'll be cooking for them, so.
All right.
And that group, want to acknowledge, Councilman Jackson was instrumental in getting them here. They're here this week and they're gonna be helping with, minor repairs, helping to
That's this week.
take out carpets and sheetrock and helping with limbs. Paint, you know, minor stuff that doesn't require permits, so we're glad to have them in the area.
All right, thank you. Anything else?
So if you know anyone that
I don't know
has
if
to sign
you've
them.
driven up Henderson Road, Henderson Drive, right-hand side, across from one of the churches there, one of the largest oak trees.
That's the one that took the electricity out for a week?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, man.
One of the large, now, I don't have no idea about homeowner or anybody there, but that thing
Oh,
is
I know what you're
absolutely
talking about.
massive and huge.
It is.
And it's still there. The only part that's been cut is what had toppled all the electrical lines. And the rest of the tree is just still there.
laying there.
But I mean, there's a lot of it throughout the area. You know, and I don't know if the county's using this same contractor or not, but, you know, a lot of places have been pulling it out, and they haven't been able to bring any more out until that load got picked up. And there's another load that comes out, and there's quite a few areas
Still have that.
that are still like that.
And
Yeah.
not only that, when you go to work and come home and you clean up your area or whatever, it's a lot of big stuff.
Yeah.
And I know a girl right now that's got a big tree right beside her house, which I don't know how she gonna get it up unless she pay somebody, but like the city still got a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
The
A lot of stuff
24th.
to pick up. Yeah, like I said, hopefully.
I've got a
it could go longer,
contractor
but that's
coming
the
to
deadline
take mine
now.
out finally tomorrow,
Yeah.
finally, got somebody.
Because one of the issues when you own a property is really your responsibility.
Yeah.
Now, I got a question. Like, what about those, I guess, I don't know what they call them here, but I call it a ditch that goes around the property that trees fell in? Because like where I stay at, the city used to clean that up.
Right.
And then all of the trees in that ditch fell in, right next to my house. Now, I cut them up.
Soku Creek,
But they
which
still
is
in there.
one of the main arteries that discharges northwards, has from Maple Street south about 4 very large trees that are toppled into the creek itself.
Lily,
I'll write a note.
sending
Yeah.
an alley-oop to you.
I'll have to follow up and get you a
Yeah.
response on that.
Right, thank you.
From my experience in working with roadways, stormwater associated, you know, there are a variety of different types of ditches out there.
Oh,
And they
yeah.
belong to a variety of different types of people. So the main thing is, if you want to engage with either transportation services or public services, we can take a look at it and see whose ditch it actually is. Sometimes the city will take care of it.
Yeah.
Sometimes we can get the DOT to take care of it. But most of the time, it does typically fall on the homeowner. Because they are private.
And sometimes the city will take care of it and it doesn't belong to the city.
Well, and
You know?
and I'm talking about it, this is a named creek.
Ditches that the city
On the maps.
belongs to the city,
Yeah.
that they won't clean up over.
Let me clarify.
Well,
Even the city ditches, you still have an easement. So you're maintaining those
Yeah.
ditches on a regular basis. The city comes through once or twice a year just to make sure the flow is going through and water's flowing. But cutting the grass in them, maintaining the tree limbs, that's still the owner's responsibility. But they will come through because they don't want the drainage systems,
They just own the right to go on
they
the
own the
property,
right to go on your property.
but
and
it's
that's
still
what
your
they-
property.
And they will only go on it ideally when it's in the best interest of the city because it's affecting the city's drainage network.
Okay.
All right, any other discussion on that point?
We have a one city, our city, my city moment, I think. We belong to St. Julia and Zion Church, and we have kind of a, I call it a food desert, program where every Friday, we have been blessed with a truckload of, I'll call it disaster relief, food and supplies, and it is distributed among people who can get to St. Julia, to pick it up there.
It's something we've taken out too then.
We
Is that
do
every
take
day?
some out.
Is that every day? Just Friday?
Every Friday. Every
Specific
Friday.
time?
Around 1:30 to 2 o'clock is when we ask people to start coming in.
Till 2, Okay.
Because we have to still get it off the truck. It has to
Right.
get off the truck and then on pallets and be organized and put out, so.
That's good.
And I think there was another time, but I cannot think of when that is. I think it might, I'm not sure that it's not Sunday afternoon, after church, but, that's a possibility. But I know Friday for sure, Friday afternoons, I'm sorry.
Well, it shows that the community really had some heart for each other, and that's what counts right now.
And people have been coming.
That's a blessing.
It's just amazing to, I can't talk about it too much because I get full.
I do too.
Because I'm blessed, and I know
Me too.
people around this table are very blessed, because that was a bad storm. And a lot of people lost so much.
Everything.
And they lost everything they had. They had children, they have homes that they can't live in, and they're struggling. And we just need to make sure that we are more compassionate toward each other. And that's a way that we can, somebody delivers to us and we deliver to those who don't have. And
I'm not trying to make light of the situation, but I went down to Florida this past week and I looked at that thing at Mexico Beach. It looked like a bomb took those places out. There was nothing.
And we were all blessed because we had a category 4 coming directly at us. You know, in a drop.
Okay, does anybody have any suggestions, ideas, or policy or other action to advance the mission of the Community Engagement Advisory Committee?
I have a suggestion, and that is the same thing, just like she was saying, I know that our shelter, Second Chance Mission, was flooded at the bottom. We're still getting food from Food Line and different places, but we have to have the guys pick it up and deliver it right to the people that need it, because we have no place to keep it, and we don't have enough. So by her having it there, we can tell people. So if you know any place that they doing like at St. Jude or anything, please pass the word on, because a lot of these people don't know where to go. And I've had about 5 or 6 asking us, where can I go to get food? Because they didn't get their food, you know, the food stamps, they just got them the other week.
Right.
That food chip for the food that they lost on the hurricane.
Right.
Some of them just got them now, and I was talking to them, they was picking up their food, so.
And there's still, I know my church is still feeding, Abundant Life International Baptist Cathedral is feeding, they were doing it every day and we were providing hot meals every day, but I apologize, I don't know what the schedule is this week. But if anybody would like information, feel free to call our office.
Okay.
Because we can pass along information.
Show me what it is, so I'll ask.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Items for next agenda. We'll take an opportunity to ask anybody for items of discussion for the next agenda. So if you have any, be free to volunteer that information. I know I have one, and I will give it to Ms. Lilly because it's going to be a nice one. That's all I got to say. You know how I am. I'm very nice.
Thank you.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions or comments for consideration or community awareness?
It's at 38. The landmines, they're not landmines, moon craters that are just falling. I used to call them potholes, now I call them moon craters because they are humongous. Down in the park, there was this one that just kind of went all the way down the center of the park.
Is there a cone?
It just opened up. They've been working on it.
Okay,
and
all right.
the
That
workers
shows
have been
that.
working on it.
They're all over the city.
There are cones. Are they all, they're everywhere? Okay. I know they just kind of.
Where is that located at, ma'am?
Right downtown, Riverwalk Park.
Okay.
Yeah, and she's, Councilman Jackson's correct. If you see a cone, that means the city is aware of it. If you see one without a cone, please call us and let us know.
Thank you. Key dates for remembrance, Beirut Memorial Observation there is October 23rd. Freedom Fountain Observation, November the 1st. Veterans Day, November the 3rd. Planning Board meeting, November 13th. Holiday Parade, 17th. Home Buyers Education Course, 17th. We got a lot of calendars full here. Okay, next meeting will be fourth Monday in even number of months at 6 p.m. So the next one is October 22nd this month.
That's the incorrect date.
That's I was about to say, we're a day late.
December 17th.
December 17th?
This one was today.
Okay, that was today.
We're actually
Says
doing that
December
early.
17th.
Right.
It says it on the agenda, but it says 27th on the screen.
On the
So
screen.
for our viewing audience, it's December 17th.
Yes.
That's a
It's
typo.
actually right on the agenda.
Monday, December
Haven't had a
17th.
meeting in December in a long time.
So the Baby Ruth Memorial Observation is at 10:30 tomorrow.
Tomorrow, yes, sir. This is a, very
Alan got
significant
speaking.
one. It's our 35th.
If there's no further business, do we have a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion that we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm over at the county, right?
Yeah, we were at 707.
Is it the economic development?
Yeah, I tell you, sometimes.
Time flies.
It's flying, it looks like.